Going live.
Hi.
Hey guys, and welcome to this week's episode of the Fertility Women. We've just been having a little bit of a chat backstage, and hence why we're all having a little bit of a giggle. We are joined by the beautiful Kirsten McLennan today from Straight Up Infertility. So if anyone who's watching at home and doesn't know Kirsten's story, she's going to be talking to us all about her multiple journeys with sort of IVF and various different fertility treatments, and her journey to parenthood, which was through surrogacy. But she's just been talking to us about a very beautiful actor that I didn't actually know existed. And I feel like he deserves a little place on this Fertility Women episode. Would one of you like to explain who he is? Because I just think he's very beautiful and I've never seen him before. So if one of you wants to explain who he is.
We was talking about Kirsten's lovely accent because she's joining us from Australia.
Yes, Melbourne.
And, you know, the other amazing Australian that we all know and love is Chris Hemsworth.
And he's
Jodie in
particular. Yeah. Steve, Jodie has something she would like to tell you, actually. Not on daytime TV.
You're going to make me blush, ladies.
Room for a treat. Anyway, I mean, I'm sure I speak on behalf of the rest of the girls. Sorry, we have lost the beautiful Sarah today to the Brit Awards. So she's the fancy one of the group and she is busy working on the Brits today. So she won't be able to join us, but we have got the beautiful Kirsten and we are all so excited to talk to you. So Kirsten, start from the beginning, because I know when we spoke, when you'd first started trying, like when we all started trying for a baby, you never expect for it not to work. Funny that.
Oh, exactly. Yes.
Start from the beginning.
Yeah, sure. So, well, I'll first say that our son Spencer was born in July 2019 in Utah in the US through surrogacy. And, you know, as you've mentioned, I'm from Melbourne, Australia, so went over to the US. But, I mean, basically our fertility journey started in about 2013. So my husband, Ryan, and I married in 2011, and it was about a year or so after that we started trying for a family. And you're exactly right, Jade. We just thought like, oh, it'll just happen straight away. I'll be pregnant within 6 months. Ryan was 30 at the time. I was 32 and didn't, you know, have any fertility issues that I knew of. So anyway, 6 months came and went. Obviously wasn't pregnant. And it was about probably around the 9 or 10 month mark that, you know, I started to get really frustrated and, you know, upset that it wasn't working. So we decided to go and see a fertility doctor. And at that appointment, she prescribed Clomid. So we did 3 months of Clomid, 3 rounds of Clomid, and that didn't work. And then we moved on to IUI, and we did 4 months of IUI, and that didn't work. And then we decided to try IVF. And I can't remember, just with that first IVF appointment, like there was no discussion around, you know, what the possible issue could be. There was no diagnosis. You know, the doctor pretty much just said, well, you know, sometimes people just need a little extra help, and why don't we give IVF a shot? So, yeah, so we started IVF.
Just obviously they gave you Clomid straight away. Did they do any investigations to find out even if you ovulated beforehand?
Look, I think there was the blood test to see that I was ovulating, and she did a scan, but otherwise, no, not really. There wasn't a lot done at all. It was just like, why don't we just give Clomid a try? And so, you know,
and that was
months of that, and
followed by IUI. That was followed straight after by IUI. There was no
straight into IUI. Yeah, 4 months of that.
And how did that make you feel? Did you want more tests, or did you understand the process at that stage? Did you know what was happening?
No, to be honest, I didn't really understand the process at that stage. And when she talked through IUI, I was like, oh, this will work for sure, because I was like, you know, they're doing the scans. I'll see when I ovulate. Then the exact time I'm ovulating, they'll, you know, put the catheter up there with Ryan's stuff. I was like, oh, this will work. So I just kind of went along with the flow. And then when it didn't, I was like, oh, that's a bit confusing.
When you was having the IUI, did they identify any issues at that time, or was everything okay? So it's just unexplained.
Yeah, just unexplained. But again, like there wasn't a lot of tests or investigation work really done at that stage. So I felt like it was just kind of the generic, like we'll just do what we do with everyone kind of approach.
That's kind of
quite quick, isn't it? Quite quick succession through the different treatments to get to IVF. Whereas some people have a really long journey before they even get to IVF.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Also a bit of a double whammy as well, because you're faced with the fact that the IUI hasn't worked, but also then not a diagnosis, but an explanation of and what's the reason of that. So, obviously it's sad and upsetting and scary that IUI is not working, but then I assume you then start questioning, well, why? Because you haven't been told anything else. You haven't been given a reason or a diagnosis. So that's
exactly.
Scary.
Yeah. But I also kind of went into it thinking, like when we started doing IVF, I kind of went in with that mindset of, oh, well, you can always just do IVF and that will be like a guarantee. I thought it would work.
Yeah, out in Australia, what's the funding like? Because obviously over here we have like the National Health Service, where it's like a bit of like a postcode lottery really, but there is some funding available. Do you have anything like that out in Australia? How does it work?
Yeah. So you do get back about half of it. So I think at the time, like maybe a cycle and egg collection was about 10,000-ish. So it was like 5,000 out of pocket.
What about the IUI and the phone? You didn't have to pay for that. You didn't have to pay for
no, the IUI you did. I think it was about maybe 1,500
per go.
For a cycle. Yeah, per go. Yeah, and Clomid I can't remember. It was probably just a couple of hundred. Yeah,
just a couple of now,
in comparison to all the expenses later on. That was the cheapest part.
Wow. So you had 4 rounds of IUI, was that right? I'm just totaling the numbers up, because if you had 4 rounds of Clomid at £200 a pop, that's 800. And then if you're having IUI at 1,500 a round and you had 4 rounds of that, are we talking like 6 grand?
Yeah, probably something like that. Yeah.
And we've not even talked about how many egg retrievals you've had.
No. Yes.
I mean, that's nothing short of phenomenal, is it? I mean, when I read it, I was like, and I thought maybe I'm a bit tired, maybe I'm a bit late. 7 egg retrievals, is that right?
Yes, 7 egg retrievals, and it was about 16
transfers.
Yes. But some of those were the surrogacy transfers. So I did about 10, I think.
Wow.
And then it was 6 surrogacy ones.
What time frame was all that over?
Oh, so I mean, all up, it took 6 years. So basically, like after we did the IUI and then we started the IVF, like the first transfer failed, obviously, and then the second transfer, like I just remember, a specialist just very casually commenting about my endometrium lining, but she kind of just said like, oh, your lining was a little bit thin on your first transfer, so like we might just give you a bit more estrogen this time to help thicken it up. And to be honest, I didn't know what the lining was. I didn't know, the role of the lining. I knew that had to be a minimum of 6 millimeters to transfer, and I know in the US and some other countries it's a minimum of 8. And my lining always just got to 6, so I was like, oh well, got to 6, like that's fine, we'll transfer. And on that second transfer, we did a natural cycle. So I just had like the estrogen and some estrogen patches and pills. And after about 3 weeks of being on all this medication and doing the scans, like the lining just barely budged, and it only got to like low 4s. And they're like, well, we'll have to cancel the cycle. And I was so upset just because I'd spent like weeks, like every second day going for scans. Like I did like 10 scans or something, and I was just on all this medication, and it made me so tired as well, all this estrogen. And then they were just like, oh, we have to cancel. So that was the first little insight that I got, that something was not right with the lining. But again, like it was just very casually kind of mentioned, to be honest. So yeah.
Definitely, I've had a similar experience, and I'm still sort of figuring it out in that side, but I've had a few transfers cancelled because of my lining, and it's it's a bit soul destroying because you're taking all the attention, you're building up to it, and every time they're like, "We'll just try more, take more," and nothing happens, and you're like, "Body, just work." It's awful.
It just feels like for nothing. Like you've done all that work for for nothing, basically. So, and then it was on. So then the third cycle, and the lining did get up to 6, and we transferred. And then a couple of days before the blood test, I started bleeding. So I was like, okay, game over. Obviously, I have my period. It's what happened with the first failed cycle. But they said, still come in for the pregnancy blood test. Many women bleed when they're pregnant, blah, blah. Anyway, so I went in for the blood test, and it did come back positive. But the HCG was really low. So it was only 45. And they said, look, it's borderline. It's not looking great, but come back in 2 days' time. We'll see if it has increased. So I went back 2 days later, and it had only gone up a little bit. So they're like, the pregnancy is not going to be viable. And they basically said, look, just stop all the progesterone and you'll have a heavy bleed. And then, come back in a week's time. We'll do a blood test, see if the HCG's gone back down to 0, basically. So did all that, and I went back a week later, had the blood test, and the HCG was still there, and it had risen. Not by enough, but it was at this stage that they were like, well, we better check that it's not an ectopic pregnancy. So they did the procedure to check my fallopian tubes. They cleaned out some endometriosis, which I didn't know I had either. They're like, oh, while we're there, we just cleaned out all this endometriosis. And did a curette and said, right, you can have heavy bleed and come back in a week's time, or we'll test, make sure the HCG's back down to 0. And then it was around Christmas time, so the clinic was like closed for nearly 2 weeks. So I had to go back. It was like 2 weeks later or whatever. And the HCG was still there and had gone up. So it was at this point that they mentioned the term pregnancy of an unknown location. And they basically said, look, the embryo is implanted somewhere, but we don't know where. And so they said it's not an ectopic, but we can't find it either, like on an ultrasound either, but your HCG continues to rise. So the final treatment was methotrexate, the like chemotherapy agent, basically. So I had 1 injection of methotrexate and then very heavy bleed, and then a week later the HCG was back to 0 and the pregnancy was gone. So, but this went over like nearly 2 months actually. By the time, like we transferred in November, it was now like mid-January. And then because I'd had methotrexate, they said, well, that's a foreign substance, so you can't try to get pregnant for the next 3 months. So then once we added it all up, it was 5 months between transfers. So it felt like such a long, long time, to be honest. So that was a bit devastating. And
how did you feel about the lack of information? Did that affect you in a negative way? Was it frustrating? Did it enhance the fear? How did that make you feel?
Felt really frustrated. It felt like they just didn't know what was going on, to be honest. So
and the thing is, when they're telling you, oh, and your HCG should go down, and then you go back and it hasn't, that just makes it look like they don't know what they're talking about, doesn't it?
Exactly.
It's not even it's the baby part of it for me, which just keeps spinning around in my brain. You've tried so hard to get a baby, you've got a baby growing there, they can't even tell you where it is, and then to go through all that to end that pregnancy, that must have been really hard.
It was.
How did you process that? How did you get through that?
Oh, it feels like it's all been a blur, to be honest. We went on a holiday straight after. So we went to Bali for a couple of weeks just to have some downtime. And I always find that holidays have a good way of, just having a bit of an escape. So for 2 weeks, it was like we just had an escape. We just my husband and I just enjoyed each other's company, and we just didn't talk about anything fertility. So I think that really helped. But, and then when we got back, obviously met with a fertility doctor again, and we just, I suppose just to give us a quick summary, we had probably another 2 or 3 failed cycles and another couple.
This is still from your first, IVF round of fresh. How many embryos did you get on your first collection?
that's a really good question. Let's say 4, maybe. Like 4 maybe made it to day 5. I can't even remember. I have to look up my files. I feel like after a while, it's all a blur. So, but it was like on the last cancel cycle before we actually changed specialists, like I finally started to find my voice a bit and started to advocate for myself, because basically, the lining again was looking really thin, and I was starting to Google and I was learning that, the lining is so important to fall pregnant and sustain a pregnancy. And on this particular cycle, it was about mid-5s, and the specialist was like, good enough, that's good enough, let's just transfer. And it was about 5 days before the transfer. And through my Googling, I had learnt that, with lining issues, it's not uncommon for the lining to fluctuate and possibly go back down. So I called them and I said, look, can I do a scan the day before the transfer just to check the lining? And I just remember they were so, not supportive of that idea. They were like, well, that's not standard practice, it's not really necessary, really trying to put me off doing it. And I was like, oh my goodness, can I please just come in for a scan? They take 5 minutes. And so begrudgingly they agreed, and I went in for that scan, and sure enough, the lining had gone back down. It was low 4s. So I was like, as if that would work. So they're like, oh, we have to cancel the transfer. So if I'd just gone ahead and not had that scan, that would have just been another wasted cycle. So it was at that point.
Wasting your embryos that you've worked.
Wait, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. We're not all blessed with millions of those, At the end of the day, when they're gone, they're gone. You can't just make some more eggs.
Exactly. And I was starting to get older as well by this point. But all our embryos also were PGS tested. Oh, so at that stage I would have been mid-30s, I think. So when we started trying, I was 32.
You look so young. You just look
I
so
know.
young.
Oh, thanks. I'm 40.
Girl.
It's the lighting. But so at this point, because we were getting so frustrated, and our specialist wasn't offering any new sort of treatment ideas, and again she was being a bit casual about the lining, so we actually changed specialists, and we changed the implantation
about the invoicing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we changed to different specialists, and he was amazing, because just from the very first appointment, he was so upfront, and he was like, look, I'll be honest with you, thin linings are rare. They're difficult to treat. We rarely know the cause. And he said in that appointment, I think your best bet is to do surrogacy. And we were like, what? And I don't know about the UK, but in Australia, surrogacy isn't that common. So commercial surrogacy is banned. Altruistic surrogacy is quite a long and complicated process.
What's banned?
What's that, sorry? Commercial surrogacy.
Wow.
Commercial surrogacy.
So paying somebody.
Paying, yes. Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You're not allowed to do that here, yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't think
we're allowed to pay expenses. But we're not allowed to pay somebody for the service.
Yes.
Yes.
That's
I don't think, are you?
Sorry?
They have to volunteer. I don't think you're allowed to ask someone to do it either. I think they have to volunteer. You can't say, will you be my surrogate? I think someone has to volunteer, and it goes through a lot of counselling. Everyone has to have one-to-one interviews and therapy things and stuff like that to make sure that everyone's in sound mind to go through it, and that's including partners and partners of the surrogates as well, which is understandable, because it's a big thing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Was you surprised to hear your new consultant go straight to surrogacy? Had you even considered that at that point?
No, had not considered that. And because it's not common in Australia, I'd never met anyone that had done surrogacy. I'd never met a surrogate. So I remember in that appointment, both my husband and I were just completely overwhelmed, and we were like, oh, I don't think we're there yet. Whoa, take a step back.
I want to carry my baby. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, exactly.
Are we still on embryos from the first collection now still? Sorry, just to make sure that I'm home. Have we done another collection yet?
Yes, done. Yes. So I did a collection with this new specialist, and he also said that he only treats patients that have PGS embryos. So we had all our embryos tested as well.
And that bumps up the price as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, but it kind of gets capped. So like after, like I think you get after you pay for, like, say 4 embryos tested, and then, you know, but if you have 10, you pay the same price as you would 4 kind of thing. So
Kirsten, what were they testing your embryos for? Because from my understanding, the problems with the your lining, your endometrium lining.
Yes. Oh, exactly. I think he was just like, let's just double check, basically. And look, you know, they all came back normal. So I remember with that particular, like the first egg collection with him, we had 4 made it to day 5, 4 tested, 4 normal. It's like 100% strike rate. So I was like, well, yeah, we know that this isn't the issue. Like, it's the lining. So
and what were they testing them for? Because there's loads that you can test the embryos for. There's so much that you can test.
Like the number of chromosomes, that there wasn't like a chromosome missing or duplicated or.
Right.
Yeah. So, because he basically said that if there is like a chromosome abnormality, then most of the time the embryo won't implant, or if it does, like, you have a high chance of miscarrying. So,
okay.
So it's just to rule it out.
So what happened?
So, yeah. So basically, I said, look, is there anything else that we can try before we move on to surrogacy? And he proposed this. It was an experimental treatment at the time, but it was a stem cell procedure. So they basically extracted my stem cells and then injected them back through my femoral artery to help rejuvenate my lining. And the lining did get the thickest it had ever gotten. So it got to about mid-6s, which for me was, you know, the best it had been. And I fell pregnant on that cycle. So we're like, yay, it's finally working. And then we went in for a scan at it's about 7.5 weeks, and I could just tell straight away, the sonographer, like, just the look on her face. I was like, oh no, something is wrong. And, you know, she said, oh, look, how far along are you meant to be? And I was like, oh, about 7.5 weeks. And she's like, right, well, you know, look, the thing is, you know, the baby's heartbeat is too slow, and the sac is an abnormal shape, and, you know, the baby's measuring too small. And she said, I just don't think this will be a viable pregnancy. So she said, look, can you come back in a couple of days' time? We'll scan again. And then when we went back 2 days later, the baby had passed by that stage, so there was no longer a heartbeat. So, you know, we were obviously devastated, because we thought that we'd finally, you know, got there. So, and I had a DNC, and even though we had transferred in a PGS embryo, we still had the embryo biopsy just to make sure that there was nothing, you know, going on that we didn't know about. And, you know, the embryo came back normal, and they also told me that it was a girl. So, yeah, so that was really tough. And then, you know, we had 3 months off, because that's what you usually do, a miscarriage. And then we did another transfer, tried again, because I thought, well, I did get pregnant, so we'll try again. And, you know, that failed. And then it was at this point that we thought, all right, let's give surrogacy a go. You know, been a few years. We'd had, I mean, by this stage, countless failed and cancelled cycles.
Sounds like it was back to back to back to back, one sort of challenge, difficulty, upset after the other.
Yes, exactly. And I feel like, I don't know, I just got to the stage where I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, we know that the lining is an issue. We're transferring in PGS, you know, normal embryos, and it's still not working. And I was like, I don't know, something just like after that last failed transfer, I was like, no, I'm done. I can't try and get pregnant again myself. So, you know, we spoke to the specialist about it, and he was like, okay, good. You've got what I suggested all along. So
you kind of knew it would have ended up there.
But you have to get there yourself, don't, like, it's similar with many things. People can advise you, even people that are professionals in their field. You've got to get there yourself. You have to be there yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it took a few months, but we got there. And so we first tried surrogacy in Canada, in Toronto, and we were matched with this beautiful woman, Julie, and we actually went over to Canada for the transfer. So, it was a long flight from Melbourne to Toronto. It's about 17 hours. But, we'd been told that with surrogacy and PGS embryos, the success rate is really high. And so I just remember we just felt so excited. Like, we're like, this will be it for sure. Like, the adrenaline was rushing, like, felt so happy about it. And, we met with Julie and her family the night before. We all had dinner, had an amazing night, and then went to the clinic. Went to the clinic the next day for the transfer, and we were just waiting in reception for ages. And, the transfer time sort of came and went. We're like, what's going on? Like, we're waiting for so long. After about an hour, a nurse came out and said, the doctor would like to see you and Ryan, in his office. Well, okay. So off we went. And anyway, he came in and he just had this awful look on his face. And he was like, I am so sorry, but the container of embryos that you have shipped across from Australia is empty. And it was just, of our whole journey, this was the lowest point, because it was not something that we had ever, I don't know, I feel like with infertility, maybe it's like a self-protection thing, but you think of different things that could go wrong. So you think like, maybe I'll have a failed transfer, or maybe have cancelled, or, gosh forbid, I'll have a miscarriage. But the container of embryos, like, no, just never entered our head. Like, people transfer eggs, embryos, sperm every day worldwide. When we spoke to our clinics in Canada and Australia and our lawyers, like, no one had heard this happening. Like, it was so freaking rare. Like, it never even entered our head.
No one knew what had happened to those embryos. No one knew what happened to them. No.
So there was possibly like 3 possible scenarios. Well, the container was empty. So they basically said, like, either it wasn't packed properly at the Melbourne clinic, or something happened in transit. Like, if the container's X-rayed, the embryos will be destroyed, or it wasn't unpacked properly. If it's X-rayed, the container's X-rayed, then the embryos will be destroyed.
Surely, I like to hope they wouldn't be doing that knowing what it was.
We just never, like, we spent months trying to investigate what had happened, and we just.
I have a couple of questions. Like, I'm shocked, really shocked. So, no one got the blame. Who paid for it? Who footed the bill for that? And I'm presuming they're your embryos, so you had to go and do IVF again.
Yes, correct. Yes. So our clinic paid for the next collection.
Oh, funny that.
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
I'm waiting for you. I'm literally
speechless. It does not happen often, but I am speechless. I don't even know. Aside from the fact that I don't know how that happens, I don't know how did that make you feel? Like, how do you process something like that?
It was awful. Like, it was, like I said, of our whole journey, that was my lowest point, because I just remember being in that room when he told us. Like, I think I went into a state of shock. Like, I couldn't hear properly. I was like, my heart was, I was just like, I don't understand. And I remember I just kept saying to him, call someone. Who can we call? Call the transport company. Call the clinic. And he was like, what? There's no one to call. And it's like, with the time zone, it's like, no, there's no one to call at 2 a.m.
But it's desperate. You're obviously despair, wasn't it? You were desperate. This was meant to be easy from now. You were meant to have this, this transfer was meant to go ahead, and someone was going to be able to grow this baby for you, and you were going to get that baby. And the fact that someone, because you would want someone to blame, and I feel that is totally valid. And I understand there is human error, and I understand things go wrong. Although I'm hearing a lot more of these lost embryos lately. I think there's a lot more of it than what we actually are aware of. But still, you want someone to validate your feelings and to take the blame, because it was going to be easy for you now, or easier.
It was terrible. And we were stuck in Toronto, and I so desperately wanted to be with, you know, my parents and my sister and my friends, and, you know, like we just, like, it took us forever to get home. Like, we just wanted to get back to Melbourne as quickly as possible. We couldn't get a flight for like 2 days later, and it's like the longest flight ever. I went through like Dallas and Sydney. It took us about 24 hours in transit to get home, but it was absolutely awful. Like, and I, you know, I started to develop this kind of superstition, because I was like, well, obviously we're just not meant to have children, because, like, of all things to happen, you know, like, it's obviously just
you
not
would feel like the universe was trying to tell you something.
Yeah,
totally.
it's like, how do you build back up to trusting the process is going to work when you've had so many, like, letdowns and something like that happen? It's like, how do you put yourself back in that situation again?
Yeah, it took a lot. And, you know, I was seeing a really good counsellor at the time, and she actually did like hypnotherapy as well, so, which I found really good. So, you know, a mix of like relaxing, but also just like kind of just giving some really positive messaging. And yeah, look, it was tough. And you're right, like, you know, I had to do another collection. So, and I was like, well, I hope I get some more embryos. So, and we did. Luckily, we did get some more embryos, and you know, we actually pushed ahead with 3 transfers in Canada with Julie. So we transferred we actually transported some more over, but through a different company. And given what had happened was like unheard of, the chance of it happening again was, you know, just be almost
I bet there
impossible.
was an element of anxiety though.
I was going to say, that over was horrendous, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, we didn't go over the next time.
Okay.
I actually couldn't do it. I was like, let's just do the transfer. Like, we'll just Skype in from Melbourne. I couldn't get back on the plane and do it again, to be honest. But we, you know, kept some in Melbourne and transported some over Toronto, but all 3 transfers failed. And, you know, the specialist had no idea why. There were no obvious complications with Julie. She had, you know, 3 children of her own. Again, we were transferring in PGS embryos, and he just couldn't explain it. He had nothing to offer. He was like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what else we can try. So it was at this point that we're like, well, we're going to stop. And we then changed to the US to do surrogacy.
Oh, you were still going to go. Obviously, you wanted to go again, but you just didn't want to do it there.
Exactly. I was like, I've had enough of Canada. We need to change countries. It's a beautiful country, but I never want to go back.
Yeah. What Canada was not a good experience for you, was it?
No. Exactly. So, yeah, we basically then changed to the US. So we matched with our beautiful surrogate Leah through Rocky Mountain Surrogacy Agency, and then we met with Dr. Fook at Utah Fertility Center. So did surrogacy in Utah, and the first transfer failed, but for the second transfer, Dr. Fook actually had something, you know, to offer, and he said, well, why don't we do an endometrial receptibility array test, which I'd never heard of. But, you know, basically he said that, you know, 25% of women actually transfer at the wrong time. And the test kind of determines when, again, the lining is like the most receptive to transfer the embryo. And the test came back that we had been transferring at the wrong time. So we actually fell into that 25% bucket. So we altered our transfer time.
What does that test actually involve?
Yeah.
Oh, so it was like a mock cycle. So like she had to do like all the medication and that for a whole cycle. And then it was like the old lining biopsy. So like scrape out some of the lining and test it. And then a few days later, test it again. So I think a pretty painful test actually.
Yeah.
But,
so that was one cycle that you knew you wasn't going to transfer on because it was just checking when was the best time.
Yes.
And exactly. Then the next time they'd use that to transfer.
Correct. Exactly. So the next time we're like, right, we're going to transfer at this exact time. And so this was now our second, or well, kind of third, but no, second transfer, and we fell pregnant. So we were like, amazing, yay. And we had a first scan at 8 weeks and everything looked great. Strong heartbeat, baby was measuring well, the sac was a good shape. Leah's hormone levels are really high. In actual fact, they were like, oh, you could even be having twins, like it's so high. So everything looked great. And the next scan was 2 weeks later at 10 weeks, and it was at 3 a.m. our time. But given the 8-week scan had gone so well and everything was tracking along well, we decided not to Skype in. One of those regrets you have. But anyway, so we didn't Skype in, and so it was 3 a.m. So I woke up at 6 a.m. and I'll take a step back. So Leah said, that her husband Josh would film the scan, and then, they'd send it to us. And then once we woke up, we just give them a call with Skype and talk through it all. Anyway, so I woke up at 6 a.m. and there were no messages on my phone, and I just knew that wasn't good, because Leah, she's a great communicator. Like, she would have sent through, the scan straight away. And Ryan was fast asleep beside me, and I saw his phone was on the bedside table, and went over to his phone, and I could see just a WhatsApp message on his home screen. And the phone was locked, but you know how some of the text still comes up. And, I just saw this message from Leah's husband, Josh, and it just said, I'm so sorry, but we've lost the baby. So, and they said the baby had passed at just under 10 weeks, basically. So, we were naturally devastated at this point, because, we thought that we were finally, especially when everything had gone so well at 8 weeks, we're like, oh, finally, this is it, like we're home and hosted kind of thing. And again, being a PGS embryo, and they'd said, once you get a heartbeat and everything's looking good, the chance of miscarriage is so low. And so, we were all naturally devastated. Leah was really devastated, because, she'd obviously, she'd never had a miscarriage or fertility issues. And she also had this awful guilt, which, was terrible. Like, she said that, she'd been too scared to talk to us. Her husband, Josh, had to kind of convince her, the next day to talk to us, because she just felt so guilty, like she'd done something wrong, which was awful. So, but what had caused the miscarriage was a subchronic hematoma, which is something that can't be prevented. It's one of those things that's just totally outside anyone's control, just cut off supply from the placenta to the baby. But one of those things that, can't be treated, can't be avoided. A lot of women apparently have them during pregnancy, but, it's rare to kind of cause miscarriage. So, of course, at this point, that superstition came back, and I was like, well, we're just not meant to have children. Like, this is, something rare has caused this, and something outside of our hands kind of thing.
All the rare stuff was coming your way, wasn't it? Let's have it straight. You lost the embryos were lost on the way over for you, which is meant to be really rare. Then you've had this hematoma, which again is really rare.
Yes.
Wow.
Lining issues rare. I know. I was like,
when we're talking to you, I feel like you're so upbeat. Is that sort of how you deal with it? Because I can see the pain in your eyes when you're talking through it. The smile on you, and it's almost like, well, this is just the way I am, because I've had to be so resilient because of all the shit that I've been through.
Yeah, it's a bit like that.
Sorry, it must be really hard, babe. Like, have you been offered support the whole way through? Because I know you said you saw a counsellor, but it's just must have been so painful. It's just non-stop.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was relentless. And I was fortunate to have, obviously my husband Ryan is amazing, and someone that's very positive, so that helps. And had amazing, have amazing friends and family as well. So, and parents and sister and that. So, like, they definitely were, that really helped. But look, it was at this point that this was the point where I felt like giving up. And we started to research. We started to look into adoption, actually, but I don't know what it's like in the UK, but in Australia, it's actually really long and complicated. So they said that firstly, you have to cease all fertility treatment, so you can't, do IVF and do adoption. So we're like, all right, we'd have to cease the treatment. And then they said that it would take about 3 to 5 years. So at this point, it'd been over 5 years. So I was like, oh gosh, like we might only just be halfway to having a baby. But at the same time, like we met with an adoption caseworker, we put in the preliminary paperwork, and we were like, you know what, maybe it's time just to like put all this to bed and just do adoption and know that we won't have a baby for 3 to 5 years. So, but yeah, I mean, because what had caused the miscarriage was so rare, so uncommon, and something that was kind of out of our hands, our doctor, kind of reiterated that we had a really good chance of obviously falling pregnant again. So can you hear that Siri's going off at my end?
No.
Okay. No. I don't know why she's going off, but anyway. Oh my goodness. Try and close there. There we go.
Yeah, don't worry.
The Siri popped up all of a sudden. So basically, he really encouraged us to try again. And, there was one last transfer in the contract with Leah. And even though Leah had gone through this horrible experience, like she was determined to help us again. She was like, I don't believe this is the end of your story. I really want to help you get here. And so, yeah, we tried one last time, and 9 months later, Spencer was born.
Oh,
so we got there in the end.
So start to finish, how long was it?
6 years.
wow.
So, but we got there in the end.
Oh,
what's that? Sorry.
How are you now?
Oh yes, I mean he's amazing. He'll be 2 in July, and oh my goodness, like it was. I know. Yeah, when people say it was worth it, like he was worth it. Like yeah, he's just absolutely amazing. The best thing that ever happened to us. So.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely worth it all. I'm so glad that we didn't give up and that we got him in the end. I couldn't imagine life without him.
It is so emotional for me to hear your story because I'm in my mid-30s. I've been trying 5 years. I've not had as many rare, difficult things happen as you, but there's definitely times where you just think, I don't have the energy to keep going, and maybe this is not meant to be. And it's a bit like maybe I should just be happy with my life and stop putting myself through this. So it is so amazing to just hear your perseverance, and you kept going, and and it's all worked out. I feel.
Yeah, it's all worked out. We're very grateful. And look, the first 6 months of his life, like I seriously cried every time I picked him up in the morning. I got him out of the cot. I was just like, he's probably like, what is she doing? Years, but I just was like, I still, can't believe it. But and look, that's why I started the Straight Up Infertility Instagram page as well, because I just really wanted to help, support other women going through it and also share my experiences and my learnings. And that's been really therapeutic for me as well. Like when I write an article for IVF Babble or do a post on my page, like it's helped me process a lot of what we went through and a lot of the emotions. And it's been a really positive experience. That's really helped, deal with everything.
Are you still in touch with Leah?
What's that, sorry?
Are you still in touch with Leah?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So we probably message like every second day.
Oh.
And we've got that Marco Polo app where you do like video messages. So we're constantly in contact. And we actually had planned to go. We actually had a holiday booked in May last year to go over to the US and to take Spencer, and obviously COVID. So that got called off. But no, we regularly are in contact, regularly Skype. She always sends Spencer presents for Christmas and birthdays, and he can now say her name, which is great. So he goes, Nia. So because it won't be too long until we start to talk to him about everything, and
that was my next question. I was going to ask you if you were going to obviously tell him how she was literally a hand-picked guardian angel for you, basically.
Yes,
like what she's done
is exactly. Oh, amazing. Just one of those women, and same with her, husband and sons, just the most selfless, genuine people. We actually, I should mention, we actually lived with them when we went over there. So we were in Utah for 5 weeks. We went 2 weeks before the birth, and then the first 3 weeks of Spencer's life. And my mum came as well. And we all just lived in the house together for 5 weeks, just like one big happy family, watching movies at night and getting takeaway
and just cuddling this beautiful newborn baby.
Exactly.
Wow.
So that was an amazing experience. And she was so helpful because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So she's like, this is how you put a nappy on. This is how you do the bottle. So it was actually really helpful. But it was so lovely just to all spend that time together and to meet her family and friends.
That baby felt like as soon as the baby came into the world, like all this love in this house from all these people, like, oh my God.
It was amazing. And Leah actually gave us this beautiful book before we left, and it's just like a scrapbook of our journey, and it was like, all photos and scanned photos, and Spencer's hospital tag, and then photos of you at the hospital when he was born, and it's just like the whole story. And I've started to show him that book. He obviously doesn't understand really what's going on at the moment, but just started to walk him through it, and it's just like this beautiful testament that she's put together. So it was incredible. And look, the birth as well. I mean, she actually it was probably about half an hour after he was born, and because we had adjoining rooms, and we were in the next room, feeding Spencer, and all of a sudden I see like all these people rush into her room, and we're like, what's going on there? And Ryan went to follow them. They're like, you have to wait outside, and an emergency team had rushed in because she'd started to hemorrhage, and she lost like nearly 2 liters of blood. So she was fine in the end, but she risked her life for us. And
to give you life, literally risked her life to give you life.
Literally risked her life. And she also had post preeclampsia as well. So in the days that followed, she, was dizzy and having headaches and swelling, and, they were straight onto it, and she had the medication and that. But, that can be life-threatening as well. So, she literally risked her life for us. So she is definitely our guardian angel.
Oh. Like, Kirsten, what would be your message to anyone who's watching that's considering becoming a surrogate? What does it mean?
Becoming a surrogate, or
anyone watching who's thinking of becoming a surrogate for somebody else?
Yeah. I mean, it's life-changing. I mean, if it wasn't for Leah, we wouldn't have a family. That's so she's given us the gift of life. She's given us our beautiful, beautiful son. So you are changing someone's life, being a surrogate. And, Leah will say that, she, like, the joy and happiness that she's got out of being a surrogate has just been amazing, like, just life-changing for her as well. And she's done it, this was her second time. So she was a surrogate previously for a couple from Spain. So, she's done it twice. So, all boys. So she's got 2 boys of her own, and she's got 2 surrogate boys. So if you want a boy,
give her a call.
Yeah.
Oh,
so just life-changing.
It's incredible that you've got like a lifelong bond with someone who was a stranger.
Yes. Oh, I know. Because like when we met, we obviously did it over Skype, and but we just had that instant rapport. Like we were just chatting away, you know, like an hour kind of zoomed by. And, you know, at the end of it, you basically, you know, you contact the agency and say like, oh, you know, we're keen to match if she is. And I'm like, please be keen to match. And yeah, she was like, yeah, I'd love to. And she'd sent me this like card going like, I'd love to carry your Joey. I was like, okay. So, but yeah, just like straight away, we just felt so close. And again, just like, you know, all living together, like we just felt like family straight away. So it was just really just now, it was like it was always meant to be, like we're always meant to be in each other's lives. So the experience. So even though, you know, not something that I thought, like I said, I thought I'd be pregnant within 6 months. But, you know, it's also one of those things that if I hadn't gone through this journey, then I wouldn't have had the beautiful experience of surrogacy as well. So that's kind of the silver lining.
Yeah. Do you know what? It's such a beautiful end to a story that was really so hard to even try and untangle and listen to. It was just, I mean, overwhelming for probably all of us and everyone at home listening as well, let alone for like you actually having to live that experience. But it's just such a beautiful ending. And obviously I've never experienced anything like close relationship with surrogacy at all. And I know one person like on a personal level that's been through surrogacy. But the more that I'm talking to people about it, the more I realise is how absolutely beautiful it is. And although I think initially, and this being a safe space, as it's okay to say this, initially, if I'd would have thought someone had said to me about surrogacy, I would have been like, oh no, that would have been deemed almost, I would have received that maybe in a negative light because I would have wanted to carry my baby and blah, blah, blah. But it's actually so beautiful. And until you really listen to someone like you talk about it and how it's changed your life and give such a gorgeous perspective, it's really refreshing. It's really lovely.
Yeah. And look, it was, you know, when we first, you know, explored it, you know, there was definitely a grieving process for me to know that I would not be carrying a baby's term and I would not be giving birth myself. And, you know, so like that was hard. And, but again, I think, you know, Leah was so amazing that, you know, I sort of thought like, oh, am I going to be jealous or am I going to feel, you know, strange about it? And, you know, she was so inclusive and she just kept saying like, oh, I'm just extreme babysitting. I've got a hitchhiker on board and, you know, but he's your son, like, and I don't know, like half the time I felt like I was pregnant. So but, there was definitely a grieving period. What's that?
It's like the trust that you put in somebody else. Because I mean, I've had conversations about potentially one day needing a surrogate because obviously it's not working for me for whatever reason. And, you know, I'm really lucky that my sister she's had 3 healthy children and she's like, I definitely, when you were ready, I'd be there for you. And it feels like that's safe because, you know, I've got a trusting relationship with her. So, you know, in my head, I'm not sure how I would get to that point of someone who I didn't know, unless maybe I had that instant connection with them. But surely that's quite rare, isn't it? To meet somebody and just know that you can trust them with the most precious thing potentially in your life. You've got to have a lot of trust and faith in that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And also because my husband works for a US company, and so he actually went over a couple of times as well. So he went over, I think it was between the first and the second transfer, so before we were pregnant, and met Leah and Josh in person and their 2 boys. And then he went over when she was 20 weeks pregnant. So, and he stayed with them and that. So like that kind of helped as well, like going over and meeting them in person. But yeah, it's hard to explain, but just from the get-go, I was like, I've just got this trust.
I think if you're a surrogate, you must, I think these women that do this are these different kind of human. And I truly believe that, because to
sound's gone for me.
Do that. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah.
To want to do that for someone,
oh, no.
you have to be like a special person, don't you, to want to do that for somebody else? And I think that obviously must be where that kind of trust comes from. I think Kirsten might have lost us on the volume level. Can you hear her?
Hello?
Can you hear her?
Oh no.
It worked so well for so long.
Wow, and to be fair, what an amazing call that was. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to really quickly, I've just popped Kirsten on mute now because we can't hear her and she can't hear us, but she's going to watch this back, I'm sure, so we can say thank you for coming on and just being so amazing, because wasn't she just incredible?
I can hear. Yes, I don't know what happened then. The sound just completely went. I'm so glad that happened more towards the end and not.
No, we were saying how amazing it went, and just wow. For me, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on and just shining a light on talking about a subject. Again, I feel like infertility is still taboo, but I feel like behind infertility, you've almost got surrogacy and baby loss, which are sort of, they all need to be pulled through together. So the more that we're like turning up the volume on this, I just feel like it's so important. And you have just explained the most, wow, frustrating and lengthily process ever to end with the most beautiful story. So from me, like a heartfelt thanks for coming on. I thought it was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on and letting me share my story. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I think the same for me. I just want to say your perseverance and commitment definitely is encouraging for people maybe like me and me who feel like you've been in it for years and there's just no light at the end of the tunnel, but that just keeping going, keeping trying is an incredible strength. But obviously you know it's led to the perfect ending for you, which is amazing.
Thank you.
That's fine. We don't have any questions. Nobody. I haven't even asked anyone if they want to ask any questions. I don't think. If you do, you have like seconds or forever hold your peace. Or you don't have to hold your peace. You can just message Kirsten on Instagram. And I'm sure
absolutely, definitely. Anyone can send me a message through Straight Up Infertility. Definitely.
Perfect. What I'll do is I will tag your Instagram handle in the description of this YouTube video anyway. Thank you so much for joining us, Kirsten. Obviously, for the rest of the girls, thank you so much for being here again and every single week. And for everyone at home, thank you so much for joining us. If you watch it back on replay, do just give us a hashtag replay in the comments so we know where the views are coming from. And I look forward to catching up with you all next week at 11.
Bye.